So welcome, sir. It's good to see you as always, Mr. Williams. We give thanks for your remarkable leadership, tenacity, commitment to our community. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks to our ancestors, by giving thanks to the original stewards the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, sir, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Well, so Ray Williams, where do I start? I sit in a number of capacities. Certainly for community, I'm chair of Black Opportunity Fund. I also sit on the board of 100 Strong for Young Black Boys. I am a past president of the Canadian Association of Financial Professionals. I was the third president and one of the co-founders 27 years ago. I am someone that is interested in helping my communities across the country and across the world, wherever I can. But I live in Canada. And so at the end of the day, what I push for is greater equity, greater access in any space that I happen to be occupying. There is an importance of that because based on who I am, where I come from, I'm a child of the West Indies. I was born in Grenada, grew up in the country, barefoot, cutlass in my hand, short pants on. Many years later, through education, through travel, I've been able to move my lot, and in doing so, have been appreciative of the fact that there are so many others out there that, given the opportunity, can do so much. So that's kind of the sort of the intro around, Ray. What you should also know about me is that I am a husband. My wife Georgina and I have been together for 40 years, married for 34. I have two amazing young people in my life that I'm very honored to call my children, who are independent humans doing their work. My daughter lives in the UK. My son lives here in Canada. And what really will inform you about me is that I love to eat, cook, and have fun. That's the the big piece.
I love it. And I appreciate your candor, your transparency, and the remarkable work, and just centering community and family, because what's more important than that, So I give thanks for you sharing those actionable insights with us. My next question is around what is inspiring you right now. What's driving you? What's inspiring you right now in your work?
So I think more than anything else is the notion of mortality. I turned 65 last month. I've been in the business world for 42 years. I'm about to retire from the organization, the bank that I've been working for the last 19 years. There is so much work to do. I have a friend who points out, for most men, by the time you get to 65, really, you've got only 15 years left, and I'm like, wow, well, thank you for that. But all it speaks to is that despite the work that might have been undertaken thus far, when I look around and I look at my communities and I look at where I engage, there is so much work that still has to be done. Let me share with you that in 1990, when I arrived in Canada, I looked around Bay Street, and what I saw was not enough reflection of who I am as a Black person. And when I did see Black people in Bay Street, it was generally speaking in the back office segments, not in the trading room where I was participating, not in that state that allowed me access to a lot more. Hence, we came up with what is now today the CAUFP, the Canadian Association of Financial Professionals. Back then, we were known as the National Association of Urban Bankers. We have to take the opportunity, and I've always tried to take the opportunity to create change that is impactful for those around me, maybe for myself as well, with some degree of selfishness. But there's nothing that I dislike more than to see inequity around me. And at every opportunity, I will try and change that. And sometimes it means that you're not really pushing the needle, moving the needle substantially, but you still have to create a path. So it's always quite interesting. In the last 3 years, we've seen so much about diversity, inclusion, anti-Black racism, and so on and so forth. And some people have been surprised that I've been involved in this work dating back to the late 90s, early 2000s, when I tell them, yeah, I was working with the federal government, as an advisor on embracing change within the federal public service, especially at the EX level. That was 2000, right? During Chrétien's government. I spent 6 years doing that. So this is not, Johnny come lately to the party. This is someone who has been very much involved in aspects of community and trying to create change in the spaces that I occupy.
Ashe, amen, amen. We give thanks for you paving a way for those that are coming up behind you, and for doing it with sheer integrity and a clear commitment to community, and just centering those principles you mentioned: justice, access, inclusion, diversity, and equity. We give thanks. And I didn't even know about the work around COFPE or the National Association of Urban Bankers. I've been connected with COFPE for years. I didn't have that context. So once again, thank you for all that you've done for so many, sir. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches that you've taken on to address some of these issues?
So the challenges are always really, because, you sit as a Black man in Bay Street and you say, well, I see inequity, and people are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. This is Canada. We're fantastic. We're fabulous. And there is a lot of truth to that. But it's the truth that those who have not walked in our shoes, that they do not see. And so, notwithstanding the fact that you share your lived perspectives, what ends up happening is people like, complain, chip on his shoulder, whatever. So you have to overcome all of that as you try and create change. And you have to do it in a way that is not provocative. Look, to be quite frank, I will tell you there have been many times within my career where I've been slapped down, in so much that my outspokenness has created problems for me in terms of how I advance. But for me, the most important thing is that I need to be able to at all times look at myself in the mirror and like what I see. I want my wife, when she looks at me, to know that despite all my sort of weaknesses, all my shortcomings, failings, that the man that she's looking at as her husband is still the man that is trying his best. And I want my young people, my daughter and my son, to look at me in that same fashion. So for me, the integrity of trying to do your best at all times has to be there. So I built, in large part, my legacy and how I operate based on that integrity. It is important to me. I am a person that when I set my mind to something and I decide I'm going to go after it, I'm going to go after it. It doesn't matter if I actually fail. It's actually the undertaking, right? You strive to do better. And as you strive to do better, you'll always surprise yourself. Now, in terms of some of those very same challenges, a lot of the time is finding the right people around you who will listen, that you can communicate and convey what you see as an issue, hear their points of view. So you're looking at what everyone refers to as allies. I'm always looking more so for sponsors, right? Because these are the people that can really create change based on the conversation I'm having with them. But you have to show up as an individual. You have to show up with your conviction, not almost all the time, in order for people to really sort of embrace and maybe listen to what it is that you're saying as you put out, here are the challenges I see, here are the challenges that I face and other people like me face, and here's what we might be able to do to change the environment to a place that actually represents best for all.
I couldn't agree more, sir. I couldn't agree more. I appreciate those remarkable, actionable insights as always. My next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work? You've articulated such a long legacy of not just advocacy, but community building, and with a family-centered framework and analysis. So I'd love to hear, do you have any key priorities right now at this age and stage in your life and career?
Yep, absolutely. It's kind of interesting. In announcing my retirement, people are like, oh, you're going to have so much more time in your hands. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I know that only because, time is, such a precious thing. But by the same token, when I look at, so Black Opportunity Fund has been in operation for 3 years. We have probably one of the most amazing CEOs, executive directors, a gentleman called Craig Wellington. Craig has literally operationalized with limited resources, no government funding, pretty much everything that we've wanted to see occur, right? And he's done it with excellence, and he's done it in a way that anyone looking at our organization, I mean, look, we're a charitable organization, and probably one of the few that is coast to coast to coast as a Black charitable organization. You look at our board and you'll see that reflection in terms of where people come from Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, right? And that's simply us making it very clear that who we serve are our Black communities across Canada. And the importance of that cannot be underscored enough. And that we need to have a very clear understanding that there is no monolith that represents Black Canada, that there are communities that have differences that are Black right across Canada. That being the case, we need to ensure as we engage that we're engaging in a fashion where we are listening locally to what the needs of those populations are, and we're being steered in our actions and how we support and how we help build capacity based on those needs. So you asked me, what are the sort of immediate things for me? A large part of it is, how do I support Black Opportunity Fund in its goals, right? We have some very big goals. We have, I think, a model that is different to anybody else out there, because our model is we are trying to build sustainability, right? And that sustainability has to be around how we do things differently. We have seen very clearly that the philanthropic models in large part simply don't work. They don't work, right? Because if they were working, we would be in a very different place as Black communities, just like obvious stuff. So we've created something that represents, we believe, a change. And that change is reflected in that we are trying to achieve both economic and social impact. And we're looking at base levels to see where that occurs. And we have to acknowledge that there are lots and lots of organizations that have traditionally been in the space undertaking the work. We're not trying to replace those organizations, far from it. We're trying to actually help create greater capacity for those organizations to make them even more successful in what they're doing. So our work takes the form of engaging, creating capacity for entrepreneurs, because we believe that it is important that we have a really, really solid Black entrepreneur ecosystem with the appropriate supports. So we've engaged the banks in that regard. And thus far, what we're seeing, we really like. Where the philanthropic piece is concerned, we've also engaged a number of donors in that regard. But we also want to help change maybe a lot of the sort of approach that's been more general. Look, there's a whole sort of savior mentality when it comes to philanthropy, right? And the bottom line is, great, we know that you want to contribute, but because you're contributing, you should not always be directing how that contribution should be engaged, right? Because again, I go back to the notion that the people who are in need are the ones that are in the best position to necessarily indicate how those funds should be best applied, where they are most needed. So we're trying to change a bunch of things, including, rather than this whole annual, let's make the application, let's have multi-year gives that allows the work to be done. And so, it's only every 2 or 3 years that you have to come back to do that. But along the way, we want to also create revenue, generate revenue as Black Opportunity Fund. And so one of the things that we will be undertaking in the near future, and watch this space, we've got a couple of venture capital funds that we're setting up, some of it around housing, because housing ends up being one of the biggest and most important facets in wealth creation. Our communities have not done well in this regard. I mean, there was a report by RBC last year, if I'm not mistaken, And what it basically spoke to, that within the period that was COVID, the wealth creation for the Canadian population was some ridiculous amount based on home ownership. Well, if the Black Canadian population had owned homes on a pro rata basis as the wider community, there would have been probably an additional $100 billion of wealth creation for our communities. But guess what? We simply, in most instances, don't have that access. And housing continues to be the one primary thing, apart from just being shelter. It changes your perspective when you have shelter. It changes your perspective when you're an owner, right? It gives you so much more by way of everything that's required for your economic security. That shelter is important. But again, I go back to the notion of the piece that represents wealth creation there, right? That is your biggest component. And so we're having to try and bridge the gap. There are so many people out there who are paying rent. If they're paying rent, chances are they can manage, financing the debt on a mortgage. But the challenge is the front end piece. How do you get that 10, 20% deposit that you require? Are you able to save for that? So we have to disrupt that piece of the conversation and actually create solutions, which we're doing right now, right? So we will work in conjunction with the bodies out there, such as CMHC. We'll work in conjunction with some of the builders and developers who are actually interested in not only building, developing, and making money, but also have an altruistic bent around making sure that there's affordability. You got organizations like Daniels Corp. You got organizations like Dream. There's a bunch of different organizations out there. And more importantly, we're looking to engage and support the very limited number of Black developers who are out in the space. How do we get more of those going? So there's a bunch of things that we're looking at as you ask about what's Ray going to be up to. That's just a little piece, a little taste of what's there. There's a huge amount out there that needs to be done for community. So when I say my work is cut out, and I will be fully engaged with my time. This is Black Opportunity Fund is a really huge component of where I see me addressing more of my time and helping the organization grow and move forward.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And there's so much exciting things happening right now. I was part of organizing a panel recently for Minister Sean Fraser around housing, and our beloved.
I was there.
Okay, so
I was there. So you got some massive big ups. I was in Ottawa in the room, and I got some. You got some massive big ups around. Thank you, Victor Bosalal, for of Setsi, blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, my boy is like, he might not be in the house, but he's here in spirit. And that was, by the way, that panel was wicked. So you had people like Cheryl Case on the panel,
Isaac
from BChat and CP Planning. We at Black Opportunity Fund work very closely with her. You had Isaac Olawalafe, who's always been in that space, talking about some of the things he's looking to do. You had the minister there. You had a really interesting chap called Stéphane Corriveau that I've been doing some work with. That guy's amazing. They at Centre, they're doing some work that I think has huge impact and possibilities for Black communities as well. But they're so heavily focused on affordable housing and these models that I've seen. I've actually brought them into my banking organization because I have such a belief in what they're doing. And by the way, Stéphane stole the show. He dropped the mic so wicked, man. I gotta tell you, I like it, Megan. Whoa, just off the cuff talking, brilliant. But you were mentioning Minister Sean Fraser, and I've now had the opportunity to engage with him a couple of times. And I gotta tell you, he gets it. He really gets it. For the first time, I'm seeing someone who gets it and who I think has the courage to step into the fray and actually create change. And I think part of him getting it was the fact that he was immigration minister. And so when you think about immigration represents household formation in Canada. The majority of the immigrants coming to Canada are not refugees. They are actually economic immigrants. These are people that come in with money. These are people that come in with degrees, in fact, multiple degrees. These are people who quite often come in from a generational standpoint. You know, mom and dad is coming in with their kids and maybe grandma and grandpa. And so what is the first thing that they will require? Shelter, right? So the federal government cannot sit there and say, oh, well, housing is not a federal thing. Nonsense. It is, because you make it so based on some of your other policies. And so you have to bring those together. So when you start talking to someone like Minister Sean Fraser about these things, you see and understand that he gets it, right? And when you start making suggestions and he starts asking the questions, you really, really know that he gets it, because he's on point in his questions. He's listening and he's gaining a huge amount of knowledge in the space. I really do believe that under his leadership, there's a real opportunity for us to move the needle with scale as it speaks to affordability, because affordability is one of those things where it requires whole of community. And when I say that, I'm talking about everyone who operates in the housing ecosystem. So that means the feds, that means the municipal government, that means the provincial government, that means the housing secretariats, that means the builders and developers, that means the banks who are undertaking finances, the credit unions, that means all the community housing organizations in the different jurisdictions right across the country. And because there is no housing market, there are housing markets. So what you actually end up solving for in one jurisdiction may not be easily applicable in the other. Think about it for a moment. You know, an urban setting versus a rural setting, a First Nations setting. You know, so you can see how that would be. But the interesting thing is, you tend to have the same players, and so it's how you apply what might be a solution in all these different jurisdictions. So when I tell you that, you know, there's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of work to do. But increasingly, some of the players that I'm seeing who have an interest in moving the needle, when you have leadership of the kind that I'm seeing through Sean Fraser right now, it leaves me extremely hopeful about, you know, what's next and where we go next. And it also leaves me hopeful that for Black communities, there's an opportunity for us to really bridge the gap and do a hell of a lot more.
I couldn't agree more. And your analysis is bang on, especially around the developer piece. Like when I think about the work that Brother Isaac has been doing for almost 2 decades, a Black developer, incredible. And then when you think about, I don't know if you know Tim Caldwell from Channels Construction. Channels did $250 million last year, largest B cert in the world, Indigenous leader. So the scale and growth that can happen in this ecosystem, and the fact that you're able to connect Minister Sean Fraser's portfolio prior to right now and showing the actual overarching theme that he can bring in terms of a lens, incredible. Yeah. So once again, I appreciate your leadership, your analysis, the actionable insights, and clearly your vision for our community. It's inspiring, sir. Thank you. Thank you. So I have 2 more questions. So my next question is more of a personal question. It's your 90th birthday party. Let's say 100th birthday party. You know, we want you to live long because we need you around. And everyone is there, family, friends, colleagues, allies. What do you want to hear about Mr. Williams? What do you want to hear about Ray? Yeah.
What I would want in any situation like that is everyone just boogieing and having the best time, because I'm very much about that, right? At the end of the day, what I will tell you is that I'm blessed in the number of friendships I have in so many different places, in so many different sectors. And that's just really about engagement. And I love engaging people. I love hearing people's stories. For me, one of the joys of this life is vicariously living through hearing people's stories, because I have my own, but hearing people's stories opens up your eyes to so much in the world that you might not have been personally exposed to. So that gives me the joy of having relationships in so many different spots. So just having my people in the room is more than sufficient. I don't need to hear anything. Having that vibe, having that sense of well-being and joy goes an awfully long way. It's like when you have your best friends around, right? You're sitting down, you're chilling, you're chatting. There doesn't need to be an agenda. It's just having people in a space. That actually is the agenda.
Amen. Amen. Ashe, I agree completely. So my last question, sir. Do you have any closing thoughts or a call to action for our listeners and viewers?
I think the biggest call to action is that we continue to ensure that there is a light shone on anti-Black racism, that there's a light shone on the inequities that still exist in so many aspects of our systems, and that we need to ensure that, notwithstanding, the George Floyd effect in large part has dissipated, there is still that same work to be done. It hasn't changed enough. When you think about the amount of organizations who made commitments and now they're off after the next shiny, bright thing, what you realize is that this work is not sort of short-term work. This work is all about the marathon. This work is all about, ensuring that irrespective of what's going on, you're driving towards that goal in terms of change. And that's what we continue to do at Black Opportunity Fund. That's what we continue to do at 100 Strong. That's what we continue to do as community in terms of how we engage and what it is that we want to see.
Ashe, I couldn't agree more. This is an intergenerational struggle. We stand on the shoulders of Dudley Laws, Shirona Hall, Dr. Charmaine Marine, Charles Roach, so many elders and leaders that literally put their lives and sacrificed time with their families, sacrificed careers. And you even mentioned the many sacrifices you make in terms of thousands of hours and commitments to initiatives where you could have just gone home, done your thing, and not worry about community. So once again, I'm big on giving folks their flowers while they're still here to receive it. And I just really appreciate your visionary leadership, your commitment to our community, the firm stance you take, and the fact that you're able to piece together some such complex, pervasive challenges that really impact future generations. So from the bottom of my heart, I give thanks for all that you do, sir, for so many. And as always at Setsi, we close the way we began this interview by acknowledging our ancestors, by acknowledging the creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders, all the community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, sir, for everything you do.
Victor, thank you so much for the time. Very much enjoyed chatting with you, man.